I consider, I guess my UPG is that to force a Fylgja is an insult to the real one. And if the real one hasn't shown you who it is yet, you could potentially say, I'm a bear, damn it, I'm a bear, and chase off the fox that is your Fylgja that would actually be there to help you when you needed it down the road, because your ego was bigger than your connection to the source. Welcome to Northwoods Kindred. I'm your Gothi Bolvar, and on this channel we discuss all things Asatru Kindred related. Today we're going to talk about your Fylgja. Stick around. So it's important to distinguish first what is the Fylgja. The Fylgja is more often in the sagas regarded as the guardian spirit or the spirit of a person. And a lot of times when people with a little bit of foresight would dream about a person, they wouldn't dream about the person as a person, they would dream about their Fylgja or their animal spirit, or some other cultures call it a fetch, or just an animal spirit in general. And it's distinguished from the Haninga, as the Haninga is supposed to be your ancestral luck, and sometimes that's passed down through the Fylgja and also sometimes through the Disir. But as the Fylgja usually appears as an animal, a bird or mammal or something of that sort, it never appears as a woman. The Fylgja always appears as an animal, never as a woman. So when you're reading through the sagas and you read of an old woman appearing or various women appearing, those are generally represented as the Disir. So it's important to distinguish that the Fylgja, the Haninga, and the Disir are separate, although they all are very personal and family related. But the main distinguishing characteristic is that nobody ever sacrifices to the Fylgja or the Haninga, but they do sacrifice to the Disir, because the Disir are more thought of as a living ancestral spirit that's passed down through the line, whereas the Fylgja is your guardian spirit and the Haninga is the luck that comes with it. And all of that is separate, again, from the Landvatir and the Husvatir. So let's talk about the Fylgja. So sometimes when you read through the sagas, you'll find the expression of a king Fylgja or an Otta Fylgja. And the king Fylgja is the king's guardian spirit, or the guardian spirit of a king's line. And the Otta Fylgja would be the guardian of a family or a family's line that's passed down through the generations. So in the Volsung saga, King Volsung married his daughter Signy to King Sigir. When Sigir departed, she had spoke to her father and said, I do not want to go with Sigir, and my mind does not feel love towards him. And I know by my foresight and from our King Fylgja that this marriage will cause much sorrow to us if it is not broken off soon. And that's from the Volsung saga. So one would believe that she actually communicates with, or she has the foresight to exchange information with her own Fylgja, with her own guardian spirits, or the King Fylgja, which is the guardian spirits passed down through that king's line. And sometimes in the sagas it mentions where a guardian spirit might be loaned to another or might follow another person by the request of the person who it's supposed to be guarding. And here's an example of that. Thorsten went to find Vergi Sindri and give him good gifts, and they separated with the greatest of friendships. The Vergi said, Now must we separate for some time, and fare thee well. I tell thee that my Disir will constantly follow thee. Thereupon Thorsten went to his boat and rowed with his men. And that's from Thorsten Vikingsson. In that case, it may not be a Fylgja, but a Disir that he had requested to follow and keep his friend safe, because I guess it's believed that the family spirit, the Disir, you can ask favors of it that would extend beyond your own family lines, outside the home and outside the family. So another point where the Fylgja is mentioned is in Fornmannarsögur. And it says, At the time when Olaf came to Gardarki, there were many men in Holmgard who foretold future things. And this is actually mentioned elsewhere too, where these men had foresight and essentially were Seathman with witchy type skills, practicing witchy type crafts like Seder. In Holmgard, who foretold future things, they could tell by their wisdom that the Fylgjas of a young foreigner had come into the country. And they pluralize that, the Fylgjas, the guardian spirits of a young foreigner, not just a single spirit. so that you can have more than one Fylgja, according to the Saga. Had come into the country, and that these were so lucky looking that never had they seen the Fylgjas of any man like them. And I don't know what that means. I don't understand what a lucky Fylgja looks like, or how they could tell that just by looking at an animal, that the animal appeared to be lucky. But that was that's the recollection in the Saga. And I know we're talking about Fylgjas here, but it's really kind of hard to discuss them exclusively without also talking a little bit about the Disir. So I'm going to read a little bit Fylgja's Saga, where he actually had seen a Disir, and it foretold him future happenings that weren't to be discovered until a ship arrived pretty far out in the future. So I'll read that one. Glum dreamed one night that he was standing outside his farm and looking over the fjord, and that he saw a woman going up the district from the sea and walking towards Fylgja, the farm of Glum. She was so large that her shoulders touched the mountains on both sides of the valley. He went from the house to meet her and invited her to him, and then he woke up. All thought that it was marvelous, but he said, "The dream is great and remarkable, but thus will I interpret it, that my mother's father Vigfús must be dead, and that woman who was taller than the mountains is probably his Fylgja. For he surpassed others in most things of honor, and his luck will dwell where I am." Next summer, when the ships arrived from Norway, the death of Vigfús was heard, and that is in Fylgja's Saga. So he had foretold the death of his mother's father by seeing this old woman in his dream, and he assumed that that was Vigfús's Fylgja, or his luck, which, coming as a woman, would be a Disir. The shapes most frequently assumed were those of birds and animals for the Fylgja, and in some such shape every man was supposed to have his Fylgja indicative of his character. So it is believed, or at least you can put the pieces together, that the character of the man would most often be associated with the Fylgja, or the basic character traits of the animal that he was supposed to be. Thus, a sly person or a clever person might have the Fylgja of a fox, whereas a king would have a bear or an eagle or an ox or something strong and powerful. Warriors would have wolves, things of that nature. So in Hervaver's Saga, the eagles that were dreamed of by Angetir were thought to be the Fylgjas of champions that were coming to him. So read that saga. Tell me what you think. One of the character traits that we see with the Fylgjas is that whatever shape that they assume, they often, to people that have the foresight to see the Fylgja traveling with their human companion, they often travel in front of them. They tend to go ahead of them. They'll enter a room before them, or they'll even go into a foreign land before they get there, like the case with the young foreigner who had the lucky Fylgjas that the Seedmen could see coming into their land, preceding the foreigner who they didn't know who it was. It was also believed that the Fylgja of the deceased would sometimes go ahead after the person was dead, and to warn the relatives of coming danger, like if they were maybe assassinated or something. Then their Fylgja would go ahead and warn the relatives that this band of merry, warriors was coming to destroy them, or whatever the deal was. That would tend to be something that they believed in. And more often than not, they would come to the person in a dream state, not necessarily while they were awake. It did happen occasionally while they were awake, but primarily they would come while they were asleep or in a sleep state, and they would usually wake up and remember the dream and have some sort of enlightenment about the situation that's about ready to unfold. So there's one other distinction made in the sagas, and one of them is called a Fylgjakona, which is a guardian woman or a guardian spirit, which would be a Disir, but it still kind of has that Fylgja attached to it, that Fylgja name, but it's not an animal spirit. So it's sort of like an outlier, because generally speaking, the Fylgja was an animal and the Disir was a woman or the guardian spirit. But there's one example, at least, where the Fylgjakona came to someone who was dying and then passed on to his heirs right there in front of everybody. So when Halfred, while on a voyage to Iceland, fell sick, a woman was seen to walk along the ship as she was large and had on a coat of mail, and walked on the waves as if on land. Halfred looked and saw it was his female guardian, or Fylgjakona, and said, I declare myself altogether sundered from thee. And she asked, Wilt thou Thorvald receive me? Thorvald being his son. And he replied he would not. Then Halfred the Young, his other son, said, he was the other son of Halfred, who was dying, said, I will receive thee. And then she vanished. Then Halfred said, I will give to thee, my son, the sword of the king, but the other things shall be laid in my coffin if I die on board this ship. And he's saying, God rules, I fear hell, every man must die. A little after he died, he was laid in a coffin with his things, a cloak, a helmet, and a ring, and thrown overboard. And his son, who received the Fylgja, also received the king's sword. There's other examples in the sagas where there's like an interaction between the Fylgjas or the Disir and a person in relation to the conversion to Christianity. So a lot of times they would come in dreams. In one case, Thidrandi, the son of Sida, he heard a knock on his door, and he came to the door with his sword in his hand, and he's seen 9 women on horseback. He heard and seen them coming from the north. So he rushed out to meet them, and at the same time he heard and saw 9 women dressed in white coming from the south. And the women in black attacked, and he fought ferociously. And then in the morning, when his kinsmen woke up, they asked if anybody had seen him, and they went out on the field and they found him mortally wounded. And the belief is, or the idea behind that was, the women in black were the old gods, the spirits of the old gods, or the old ancestors of the family, and they were coming forth to battle him and murder him for changing religions to the white Christ, which is what was represented by the 9 white women coming from the south to save him, but they weren't strong enough to defeat the old gods, and he died on the field. Such is the way. Convert at your own peril, I suppose. Another example from the sagas of these visions appearing in dreams. Here's one. Is one summer, King Ivar Vidfarmi went with his host west from Sweden to Redgotaland and landed in Sealand. In the evening, when King Horik retired, Aud had prepared a new bed with all the clothes in it and placed it in the middle of the floor. She requested him to sleep there and to remember what he dreamt and tell her in the morning. When asked about his dream, I dreamt, he said, that I was standing near a forest beside a fine level field, and there I saw a stag, and then a wild beast with a mane like gold ran out of the forest. The stag thrust its horn under the shoulders of the beast, and it fell dead. Thereupon I saw a large dragon fly to where the stag was, at once seize it in its claws and tear it asunder. When I saw the she-bear with her cub, which the dragon wanted to take, but the bear defended it, and then I awoke. And she answered, This is a remarkable dream, and beware thou of King Ivar my father, that he does not deceive thee when thou meetest him, for thou hast seen kings, Fylgjas, and there will be fights with them, and it will be well that this stag is not thine own Fylgja, which seems most likely to me. So in other words, she interpreted his dream as the stag being him and him being attacked by the Fylgjas of kings. And there's a cliff note on this one, and it says that Horik slew his brother Helgi, thinking that he was good friends with his wife. Afterwards, Ivar slew Horik in a fight. In the dream, Horik is the stag, Helgi is the wild beast, Ivar is the dragon, and the she-bear with the cub is Aud with her son. All of that was interpreted through a dream, and it all came to be. So there's another passage where Thorstein asks Thorir to get ready to go because he had dreamt of she-foxes and bears, and specifically one red-faced or red-cheeked bear who they thought was Jokul from the Vatnsdal. And so they had thought that Jokul with his crew, he was a red-faced bear. He had some other bears which were his kin, and then some wolves with him and a couple of she-foxes all coming to fight them, and that had appeared in a dream as well. And then of course it came to be as well. So they would think that the Fylgja of Jokul of the Vatnsdal people was the red-faced bear or the red-cheeked bear because it sort of, I guess it sort of looked like him, because in the bear being, of course, generally regarded as a Fylgja of a little bit more of nobility. So an example of how your Fylgja precedes you, even not going into a foreign land like it did with the lucky foreigner, but just as it enters a room before you, or is always in and around you. The child of an Icelandic woman named Orni, having been exposed, meaning left out to die in the forest, was saved by a bandi named Krum, and by him raised as his own and called Thorstein. One day when the boy was 7 years of age, Krum went with him to Krossvik, where the grandfather of the boy, Getir, lived. While there, he rushed forward on the floor and, as a habit of children, stumbled and fell, as Grettir laughed, and the boy asked him why he found it so funny, and Grettir answered, "It is true, for I saw that which thou didn't see." "What was it?" said Thorstein, the boy. "I can tell thee, when thou camest into the room, a young white bear followed thee and ran before thee on the floor. When he saw me, he stopped, but thou didn't, and rushed on and stumbled over the bear." So in this example, the boy at 7 years old rushed into the room and tripped over his own Fylgja, and the old man, having the foresight, saw it, thought it was funny, laughed at the boy, and then had to explain to him why he was laughing. So that was a lot of examples out of the lore, and there's a lot more, especially if you start getting really deep into the Icelandic sagas, and moreover, if you can get the full copy of the complete sagas of Icelanders, there are other examples where they meet their Fylgjas or interact with their Fylgjas, and there's a whole lot. There's a whole lot to read about it, but there's not a lot known. So it's not really clear because there aren't clear lines distinguishing the difference between the Fylgja and the Hamingja and the Disa. In a lot of cases, those lines get kind of blurred. And it may just be that in the day, they possibly didn't know the difference. So we're trying to uncover it, but we have lots of scholars and lots of communication, and we're talking back and forth to each other about this saga and that saga. But in the day, they only knew what they were told was passed down through the lines, and some of that information, like the telephone game, over a few generations, can really get a little bit skewed. And they may not know the difference at that time between a Fylgja and a Hamingja and a Disa and a Landatir. All those things might just blur together as some sort of animate spirits of the land, some protected and some not. But as we put the pieces together, or as the scholars have put the pieces together and explained it to us that are not quite scholarly, they tend to agree that the Fylgja would be the animal spirits, guardian spirits. They're with you from birth to death. They can transfer on to other family members, or they can go on their own special way after you're gone. But they generally seem to be with you, and the spirits are more often than not very closely related to your own personality and your own little quirks. And oftentimes people can have more than one. Now, our UPG is that you have three. We have a land spirit, an air spirit, and a water spirit. You may or may not ever learn what all of them are. In my case, I've been practicing and paying attention for 30 years, and I have a land spirit and an air spirit. And even though I've got over 2 years, 8 months, close to 3 years of sea time, I've still never managed to discover my sea spirit. Maybe that's because it's a UPG and it's not true, or maybe that's just because I never needed one. Because in my discovery of my land spirit and my air spirit, they in both cases have saved me from a lot of pain and potential death. So they may only ever come into your vision or into your awareness if they have to. Other than that, they may just stay in the shadows and just be there to protect you or to watch over you, waiting for that moment when they're absolutely needed. So if you know what your Fylgja is, then you probably survived some sort of a disaster. If you don't, or you're still searching, don't rush it. Sometimes you'll never find it. You shouldn't force it. I guess my UPG is that to force a Fylgja is an insult to the real one. And if the real one hasn't shown you who it is yet, you could potentially say, "I'm a bear, damn it, I'm a bear," and chase off the fox that is your Fylgja that would actually be there to help you when you needed it down the road, because your ego was bigger than your connection to to the source. Now, the reason I made this video is because I get a lot of questions about it on Discord and then on the other social medias. So this is kind of a shallow dive into the Fylgja. You really got to kind of get into the sagas and read it. Put that word in your head so that when you're reading through and it's mentioned, go back and read that passage or that section of the sagas again and kind of really internalize what's happening when this word comes up and when they're experiencing whatever they're experiencing. And you'll see that sometimes the lines get blurred. But we don't have to blur them. Just know that it is believed that we all have these guardian spirits or these animal spirits that look after us. They're very closely related to our own personality, and we should not force the fit. We're not all bears. We're not all wolves. We're not all eagles. Some of us are foxes. Some of us are mice, and various other little critters that are useful and very close to our character. To know your Fylgja is to know your true self, and that's really the goal. If you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button, share it with your friends, share it with your groups online. If you have any questions about it, put it in the comments. If you know of any more sagas that I didn't mention or didn't read from where they talk about the Fylgja or the Fylgja, go ahead and throw it down in the comments. Let's don't go down the road of the Disir and the Landvatir because that opens up a whole new alleyway, and we'll do videos on that coming up soon. And hey, remember, don't let people talk you out of it. Don't let people talk you down or tell you that you're making it up or this is all in your head or that you're crazy or you're stupid. Just read the sagas, feel it in your heart, and know that if you feel it, it's probably real, and nobody has any authority or any kind of information to tell you otherwise. Just go with it. Go with your gut feeling on this. This is a very personal thing. It's always been a personal thing. It was a personal thing back in the Viking days and before. Thousands of years before. It's a personal thing now. What you feel is what you feel, and nobody can take that away from you. You are special. You are loved. We care about you here at the Northwoods Kindred. People care about you. Go out, discover your Fylgja, discover who you truly are inside, and go be heathen.